extremely important to look at these challenges, and that's what we're facing constantly in our program in Borneo. One thing I really want to emphasize, and I direct this also to Jonathan Holly, I wonder if assessments are done looking at the current economy and why is it failing. When I see ecosystem services assessments being presented, it's very much how can we earn money from ecosystem services, rather than looking at, look, the economy of today is failing us. It's not really for people, and it's only benefiting a few sectors and damaging many other sectors, particularly local economies. Why is it failing? It's failing because ecosystem services aren't valued properly. So looking at it from that direction, you come to cost of environmental degradation. How much is that costing society? How much is that costing governments to fix these problems? Well, you can use that money that you're spending on costs to do something else that generates revenue from natural capital. Looking at it from that angle changes the discussion and actually brings more interest from people that are not conservationists. Not only economists, actually. It's the general public. The general public often doesn't care about conservation, but they do care if the economy is hampered, if there is no lasting economy in the future, if the economy is not equitable. So it's that kind of discussion and that kind of dialogue and those kinds of answers that needs to be put up, presented to policymakers and practitioners to help move forward and address some of the challenges. That's one very, very visual thing that I see when I talk to ministries of finance or economic affairs or businesses. It's a huge issue, and I think we need to try and look at it from that direction. It's number one. The other one is the life cycle of a politician is 5 years. They only care 5 years. They don't care about 20 years or next generations. So we need to try and find solutions much more closer to equity, to look, this sector is impacting this service, but giving or having a bad influence on other sectors in this kind of district or this province. So it's showing that within these 5 years you're satisfying a group of maybe elite businesses, but you're impacting a huge amount of other sectors and people's well-being. So it's those kinds of analysis and evidence that we need to build so that they are willing to change their policies and economic instruments to move towards an economy that actually values natural capital.
And just add to that, I think the evidence is what I would say is speaking of, I think the evidence is what really gets governments to act. For instance, in the case of Thailand with the recent flood in 2011, where the cost of the flood was according to something like $45 billion, it immediately prompted the government to take measures in sort of upstream watershed protection, protection of downstream flood plains and so on. But I think the real challenge is the fact that the alternative is not known. You have the business as usual scenario where governments continue to do what's been done in the past, but these sorts of ecosystem service assessments are needed to show what the alternative is, the green option in the heart of Borneo, what types of benefits the country or the region stands to gain from a different pathway is not known. And I think until you have these assessments, you can't really start to talk to them or to government about what the alternative is. And I think so that's really where more work is needed in terms of trying to understand the alternative.
I'd like to say, I think I completely agree with your point. It's information, which is what we need, and then that is also what then feeds into building the capacity for people to gather more information. So, which then that information feeds into persuading policymakers. It's sort of one big process.
If I could just briefly pick up on that also. I think, Anna, your point looking at sort of what are the costs of the negative externalities that we're not currently factoring in. I mean, there's quite a bit of awareness that these externalities are there and they do have costs, but they're not often being quantified. But often what we find too is that they're not being quantified in the language that our decision makers are speaking. To give you an example of that, we recently hosted a forum where we brought together environment and fisheries ministries involved in the Coral Triangle Initiative, 6 countries working in a region, with ministries of finance. And this was at a fairly high level. This was a ministerial meeting bringing together ministers of environment with ministers of finance. And we found that they were speaking in a completely different language. And what, in discussions during the meeting and afterwards the meeting, what sort of really came out is that the finance ministers are wanting to know how it is affecting fiscal revenues, how is it affecting the tax basis, the employment in different sectors, and really wanting that data to be quantified. So then my question, back to sort of the panel, and maybe Dolph, I'm thinking of you, in the literature, how much work is being done in terms of looking at that particular angle, looking back at the economic implications for the economy, revenue base, and taxation? Do they need different types of assessments to what we're currently doing?
Well, I can only wholeheartedly agree with what Anna was saying and what you afterwards were saying. And actually, this is a bit frustrating because this is known already for decades. There is an organization called Ecological Economics, which started in the early 1980s, I think. Split off of another branch in economics called environmental economics, which tried to at least quantify some of the environmental damage like air pollution and economic accounting procedures. But ecological economics went a step further and really questioned some of the underlying paradigms in neoclassical economics. And that is being debated in a special journal called Ecological Economics and many other environmental economics. So the issue is on the table already for decades, but somehow we don't seem to be able to make that change. And of course there are lots of vested interests in continuing business as usual at the moment. And what is quite a little bit encouraging is that at the moment they are seriously working on adjusting the system of environmental and economic accounting, which is underpinning the GDP calculations. And at the moment, any financial transaction contributes to GDP. It doesn't matter what you spend it on crime, or on pollution, or if I pay you now to dig a hole and I pay somebody else to fill it in, and the money transaction adds to the GDP, and that means we all get richer and happier. And something is wrong there. And I'm not an economist, so trained economists can explain this even much more eloquent than I can. So that is also very well known that there are big shortcomings. So yeah, but we're now working on it, and just last week I think a white paper came out on, there is a working group on including at least some of these externalities in structurally in the system of environmental and economic accounting based on this notion of ecosystem services. And it should be approved, I think, next year spring or something. It's kind of an important moment in time, because if that happens, we get a little bit closer to a more environmental and socially just measurement of how the economy is doing. I would like to say much more about it, but it is getting a little bit late. So I think these are kind of encouraging words. Let's see that way. But it's a long way because of the political inertness also, and a little bit unawareness of people voting for governments. So it's a very complex system that is not easy to change from one day to the next. And I hope I live long enough to see it happen. I've been working on this for 25 years already.
Because we have run out of time. I just want to
Well,
ask
a couple of questions. We were talking about networks, and we're trying to encourage a global network here. I just wanted to very briefly just ask each of you. You've shared perspectives from different angles. One question: from what we've shared tonight, maybe what we've learned from each other, what do you think your next step is in your own work that might bring us together? Is there any seeds there? I think of a few personal perspectives on the work that we're doing in ADB and where we might be able to work together more in partnership. I'm just wondering from each of you. Quick word.
Get on board. I would almost say we would like to hear about these case studies and include them in our network and learn from each other. And if you have places where you want to have more long-term research or work with local stakeholders, then I think the partnership can help to make that happen and provide knowledge or maybe even the people to help do that.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dolph as well. We're already working with ESP and they give us the kind of fundamental science and methodologies that we work on, but you guys are already members of the ESG network, and as Dolph said, get on board. We're always looking for more assessments, more information to kind of build on the case, provide more evidence, build more capacity, create more awareness. So yeah, definitely.
What I would say, the work that we've been doing, I think, is only one example of the many that can prove ecosystem services are so valuable in the economy. And I would encourage, if others are looking at our website, hobgreeneconomy.org, or the publication, try and tackle these kinds of issues and look at it from the economics perspective, hopefully that will trigger more policy discussion, the economic policy discussion. What I would do with my work further is very, very much related to fiscal policy impact assessments, those kinds of assessments, trying to convince particularly Ministry of Finance, Development and Economic Affairs to set economic policies that will drive investments and tax and subsidies to the direction to favor those who do sustainable practices. And it requires these kinds of policy assessment, policy impact assessments.
I think in our case, in the GMS, the real challenge is to come up with a platform or frameworks in which these sorts of ecosystem service values, but also assessments of stocks and flows, sustainable flows of ecosystem services, can actually be incorporated into decision-making processes. That's what basically, there's lots of information about value of certain ecosystems or certain types of ecosystem services or biodiversity and so on, but trying to bring them all to bear in an economic decision-making process in a context of either provincial investment strategy or a sectoral investment strategy. How you bring these to bear on a decision-making process like that. That's, I think, the benefit of network is to see what's worked in those sorts of areas and to try and learn from experiences, because it is quite a new area. As you said, there's been a lot of work on some valuation going on for a long time. But as we were saying earlier, that we're talking different languages. How do we bring those sort of information to bear on investment finance ministries in terms of the decisions they take on investing in natural capital or on investments that degrade natural capital. That's the framework that's missing. So that's what I think a network will be very useful for.
Look, thank you very much to everyone. I think they were all good points to finish the evening on, and I think it's wrapped it up nicely. Since at this point in the evening, I won't say anything more except to thank you very much for joining us. And there was actually another session running in parallel to this on also ecosystem service assessment with the Korean Environment Institute and some others. And it's sort of a pity with the scheduling conflicts that we couldn't actually all be here together or run concurrently. It was obviously despite the late hour of the night, there's interest in this. And so thank you very much. And yes, definitely. Thank you very much for translators and for the team from the ICC here and IUCN who are keeping everything running so well and late into the evening. It's really appreciated. Thank you. So thank you and good night, and happy to talk to anyone after the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have a card, you can give it if you want.
한라비 포럼 끝났습니다. 한라비 포럼 끝났습니다.
Yeah.